Hey guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
Welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Mitch Rapp podcast. What's new today, Mike?
What's new is that I am feeling a whole lot better, totally relieved about this transition to Don Bentley because I finally read my first Matt Drake book and loved it.
Yeah, no, I think that has to be like probably the biggest takeaway from reading without sanction. And, while, so I guess just a caveat, this is just our little notes. We recorded an entire episode covering without sanction on our other feed, the No Limits with Other podcast. And at the end of this, we'll leave you with a little excerpt that if you're interested, you can go check out the full thing. And when we recorded that, we tried to stay away from doing too much comparison with the Mitch Rapp. Even though it was constantly in the back of my mind. I don't know about you, Mike.
Right. Oh yeah.
But I thought that, it would be cool to just hop back on this feed and give our thoughts about, what were we thinking as we were reading it. Obviously, we already came out and said we feel better about this transition. I wonder if were there people out there when they announced that Kyle was going, like did they go back and read, his FBI series? And like, were they saying it, or was it just like, boom, the book came out and it said Kyle Mills on it? Like, I would love to, I don't remember that, even though I got I read my first book while Vince was still alive. So, yeah, I don't know. Do you remember?
No, because I wasn't plugged into social media then.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
If
Especially
I'm being honest,
not media, so like book media, social media. So.
Right. I wasn't on that. I wasn't really into regular social media. I was kind of unplugged. So I could tell you that once I heard Kyle Mills and read The Survivor, I wanted more of his stuff. And then once we started this podcast, we wanted to read Mark Beeman. We did Rising Phoenix. I read a couple of his others. I definitely want to get to Fade. I still think, as a tribute to Kyle, we got to cover Fade at some point. And I think that's going to be his first non-Mitch Rapp book since, quote, retiring or having this mini retirement from Mitch Rapp. I think that's going to be a really fun book to cover. So I got to imagine there were readers like you and me and our listeners just ready to go devour Kyle Mills once he took over the series.
Sure.
People definitely did that. But I think a lot also were just willing to say, let's try something new. And their first Kyle Mills book, like me, and I think like you, was The Survivor at the time.
Yeah. I mean, either way, I think, going forward, I think Don, at least with this first novel that I've read of his, is shown to be capable. Obviously, the people at Emily Bestler Books and Atria and Simon & Schuster think he's capable. And I definitely think there are parallels we can draw from this first book where I could tease out, I could see that being, Mitch Rapp in the Situation Room, or I could see that being, a character. Like we even get like a Marcus Dumont, like a beefed up Marcus Dumont type character, who actually, instead of being, a cyber genius, is, on the ground because he was a veteran and got attacked. I don't know. What do you want? Do you want to start with Matt Drake versus Mitch Rapp, or do you want to go somewhere else?
Well, I think I just have to offer a caveat first that both you and I have only read the first book without sanction, so we're no experts on the topic, and we could probably have so many guests, and maybe eventually we would definitely plan to, who know Don Bentley's style in and out, read everything, read his Clancy verse books and all the Matt Drake books. Forgotten War just came out, by the way.
Right,
congratulations.
Exactly.
Pub Day just a little while back. That is the fourth Matt Drake book, I want to say. So,
Correct.
Yeah, you and I, we're novices. We have a lot to go. We're going to cover all of the Matt Drake. We really want to commit to that before or during the transition to Kyle Mill to Don from Kyle. But yeah, I think I just have to caveat. We are not here to try to be experts or break down who Don Bentley is and what he's going to bring to the series. We're simply offering our first reactions. As people who just read the first Matt Drake book, what kind of seeds or what kind of things can we see fitting into the Mitch Rapp universe and what stylistic items? So just a caveat, no experts, but definitely just our initial musings, our initial thoughts. That being said, I don't think I want to compare the characters. I don't see a lot of value in that.
Sure.
But I do think it'd be important to compare, like you said, the White House scenes. What do we expect Don to bring there just based on this limited knowledge? But I'm gonna start with action, actually, because to me, the strength of Without Sanction is Matt Drake on the ground, operating, just doing badass stuff. And here's the key. He's not doing it and relying solely on his own skill set. I think Mitch progressed to a point where one of his biggest assets is the people around him and the relationship he's built up with them, the relationships he can call on, and knowing how well, not to manipulate people, but to read people. Because with Mitch, I've always said, even from the early Vince Flynn days, he can read a situation. He can put his finger on something that other people can't, and then he knows how to respond to that in the field, in the moment. And the way Matt Drake is operating here, and the way Don's writing it, we're actually in his head, the whole first person thing. So the fact that we're in the head of an operator, seeing that analysis, seeing the chess game being played, it's really cool to know that Don can have that layer. And I don't think the first person is going to come into the Mitch Rapp series. I think that would be too revolutionary to bring.
That would be crazy.
Yeah, no, that's too much, right? Like that would show that he's not fully committed to the series, but is committed to bringing his own works over. And I don't think he's going to go that route. But I think it does show us, damn, he can write a killer action scene. Holy crap, he can write a character who sees the battlefield as a chessboard and can read it perfectly and has the tactical chops to back it up. So all of that makes me think, damn, he's going to have no problem writing Mitch Rapp, Scott Coleman, Marcus Dumont, Irene Kennedy, having this whole, battlefield strategy.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I wouldn't want to compare like character to character, but the one thing I will say about Matt Drake, which I'm kind of intrigued to see what Don like sort of purports over, is, and it's definitely helped in his book with the first person, but just like the introspection that Matt has in his head.
Yes.
And I know like at times like both Kyle and Vince would deal with that, but it was very interesting to see like how Don dealt with that with his character, especially his character going through this PTSD type situation. What is Don's sort of stamp going to be on Mitch? Like if you had to pick one thing from Kyle, I'd probably say the two things, like the lightening up of the humor and probably the family aspects that he's grown to like have the relationship with Anna and Claudia. So like what are Don's one or two things that he's going to put in? Is he going to dive into that introspection? I think like this is where maybe as we're leading up to the next one, when we're reading books 2, 3, 4, what is that relationship, Matt's relationship with Layla? What does that turn into? And can we sort of tease, how maybe Don is going to want to handle, the relationships within the Rapverse in the future? At the same time, all of this could lead. It could be all for naught because right. Don could just completely, I don't know how much someone could be told to do something if they're brought onto a writing project. Everyone wants to have their own creative thing, but yeah, so it's definitely going to be a wild ride. But yeah, you're right. The action is what I'm really excited for, and deeper into the action is the descriptions, like just that hey-ho jump description.
Oh,
like
yeah.
That the entire opening, when you're going through the whole, when he's with that one chief or higher up, and they're doing all the checks together, and then all of a sudden all the guys like sort of just happen to come around him, and then each of them give him like some sort of salute, whatever, handshake, pat on the back. Like that was really cool, and I think I could see scenes where that's going to be something like that. Doing the research, putting the knowledge, the work in, are going to fit perfectly in the Rapverse.
Dude, 100%. And you know what? As you said that, it just made me think of, I'm in my mind like there's some Mitch Rapp scene, it's early Vince, where we get the technical, but not so much technical that it's bogged down by jargon. And then we also see him and the guys, rendezvousing. And it was the opening scene in Transfer of Power when Mitch docks on the beach in Iran. and he comes up
right,
from the dive. Right. He was on a boat. He abandoned that, deflated it. And then he beaches in the surf. And then under some like pier or whatever, he meets up with that team of guys. There's a team of SEALs there on the beach, and they're all changing out of their scuba gear and putting it in some wet bags. And then they're going to dump it in the sea, or they bury it even. But I'm like, yo, that hey-ho jump, and like you're saying, the procedural aspects of preparing for it, but also all the guys communicating and knowing the steps that they have to take and basically reading and playing off of one another to do the job seamlessly. Dude, that reminds me so much of Mitch on the beach. What was that guy's name? There was a team leader of that SEAL team who doesn't show up again, but who was a really cool character. Dan?
Oh, it's probably in our notes for transfer power.
Dan something? We got hardcores like Mark Harris screaming at his computer right now like, you idiots! It's blank, blank, blank. Dan Harris. I think it was Dan Harris.
Yeah.
Was it Dan Harris? It's got to be. Mark
Harris.
Mark
It was Harris.
It's
Harris
Harris,
is
right?
his last name. Yeah.
I think it's Dan Harris, man.
You have to do your Kindle search thing.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to I'm going to wager.
That shows that we are the true Vince Flynn encyclopedia here, that we can pull it out or like think we're wrong, but we're actually right,
That was Hackett and Strobel too, was it not? Was that their introduction?
No, that I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay. Well, when's the first time they come up then?
Yeah, so you're immediately proving my point wrong.
Okay, yeah. I blew it. I blew it right in my mouth. I swung for the fences and just hit a foul ball. No, Hackett and Strobel, I think, are mentioned term limits. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, because they're part of, they're brought in whenever we see the first, like, SEAL demolition, whenever Scott comes into play.
Right, exactly. I mean, regardless, I just think those two scenes are a peas in a pod. And you mentioned Frodo. I do think the way Mitch and Scott Coleman operate together, build a friendship together, and just are always on the same page. I feel like we got to see that between Matt Drake and Frodo, but inside of his head.
Sure.
Something we never got to see with Mitch. Like, he's not an emotional guy by any stretch of the imagination, but he's grown to have a lot of emotional maturity with the trauma he's dealt with. And it goes back to your earlier point about Matt Drake and the relationships and the family dynamics. I think even in just book one, that is handled so well by Don. His relationship with his wife and the struggles that he's going through, but also the family of assets that he lost. The little girl, Abir, and what it means to him.
And the father and mother, yeah.
The father and mother who they activated the beacon, but Matt Drake couldn't send in the cavalry to save them as he promised. And now he, for 6 months, is dealing with his demons and PTSD and seeing their faces everywhere he goes. I feel like that shows Don has the chops right off the bat to really write a deep personal storyline that the operators are really dealing with. And man, we know the trauma Mitch has been through. We can only imagine the trauma Anna and Claudia are going to have to reckon with eventually. They seem to be happy-go-lucky, in Namibia, sliding down the dunes and whatever. But Claudia is really seriously asking, like, what's next for this family? And Mitch has to answer that question. And Vince wanted to answer those questions. When he wrote scenes with love her or hate her, Anna, like, I know fans are divided on that, but there's no doubt it meant a lot to Vince that Mitch should try to have a normal family life. He wanted to play with that. He wanted to see what Mitch would go through because so many of our guys have gone through that. And he wanted that to be in his story. That's why it is the plot of his, magnum opus, Consent to Kill. That's where Anna dies. That's where Mitch has to deal with this. That's when he goes revenge Mitch on everybody. Like, that was Vince's crux of this series, that Mitch needs to grow. Mitch needs to be put in those situations that are very tough on him and his family. He pretends to be a cold-blooded killer with no emotion, but deep down, he is a very caring, dedicated human, friend, and now adopted father to Anna. And I think the fact that Kyle ran with that, I'm actually doing for our patrons on our patron only series, Mike's Top Mitch Moments. I'm up to number 9 now, but you betcha, cracking into that top 5 is going to be a lot of Mitch family moments. I think that really sets this series apart. And Don is showing us, just in book 1, with the way he handles Matt Drake and this family of operatives or assets that he lost and loved and can't shake and keeps thinking about. He can write that emotional maturity into who is also a stone cold killer, Matt Drake, but he can give him that sense of emotional intelligence. I think that's the right way to take Mitch at this point in his life.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think one of the other things that really stood out was you kind of mentioned at the top is the White House scenes. I think that Matt's going to definitely have the chops to write that, to, like some of the interactions with the CIA director, and although she ultimately wasn't that good of a person, but the dynamics between them and the president and the chief of staff, I see the rooting there that, we're going to see scenes that inevitably are in every single Mitch Rapp novel, placing, whether it's Irene or Irene's predecessor or whoever it may be with the president. Yeah, we're going to get a new president, right? So,
yeah, right.
And all of this obviously can change once we, know the ending of Code Red. So, it'll be interesting to see where we're left off. But I just to echo what we said at the top, I think we're in good hands with Don for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I'm real curious as we read more of his Matt Drake series and possibly even get into Target Acquired and his other Clancy books. No doubt he's probably nailing the Situation Room meetings and the dialogue there. If he's ever brought in Capitol Hill and a committee room or a hearing, that was Vince Flynn's bread and butter. I think Kyle tried it here and there, but it necessarily wasn't his go-to. I think if Don has started doing that in the Clancyverse, which I assume he has, haven't read those yet. Yeah, he's definitely going to be that's going to be awesome. I mean, you mentioned some of Don's characters in Without Sanction, book 1, were really compelling. He almost had a Stu Garrett-like character in book 1.
Right.
That chief of staff was giving us Stu Garrett vibes or Hank Clark vibes. Just phenomenal stuff right there. No reason to not trust that he's going to handle a post-Cook White House. What the heck do you do with that? Or maybe Kyle tees him up. We don't even know yet with Code Red. Everything we're saying could go right out the window and it'd be completely wrong. But I don't know. Is Kyle going to tee him up for who the president's going to be? Does he leave him an election cycle to invent his own president? Because Jorge, and we don't know if, what was his name? Jorge Gonzalez.
Gonzalez, yeah.
Is around long-term in the Matt Drake series or not. And on our Without Sanction episode, you and I even had a nice little back and forth of, is he a good guy, right? Is he on our team?
Yeah, I think you could argue that his chief of staff is definitely not on the right side of,
right.
We're not a fan of him, but the president has let, yet the jury's still out, as they say.
That would be kind of cool, right? To have one of those kind of characters. It's almost like Barbara Lonsdale. Remember how much we hated Barbara? Was it Barbara Lonsdale who was in the Extreme Measures?
And then she ended up becoming like a friend, right? Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then she ended up seeing what the guys do on an op, and they saved her life. And she has a total 180, does a total 180, has a different perspective, and now she defends our special operations and intelligence gathering on the Hill. And I'm just like, the fact you can have flexibility in characters, you can work in that gray zone. People who were black turn white, white turn black, good and evil. That's really compelling storytelling. And Kyle certainly pulled that off a bunch of times. Even just in book 1, we see Don Bentley pulling that off. It's going to be really fun to have a new author playing with. It's like a sandbox, right? Post Code Red could really be a sandbox for the Mitch Rapp universe. And if there's any sandbox I want to play in as an adult, it's the Mitch Rapp sandbox.
Yep. No, I'm super excited.
Hashtag Mitch Rapp sandbox. Let's see you tweet at us.
There you go. Tell us one thing that you ultimately have to have in your first Don Bentley novel.
Ooh. I think there's really good signs pointing to this. And I think Don has said in interviews he wants to do it. And I'm thank goodness, because I got to have it. Irene's got to make some badass calculations and some bold moves. I've got to see Irene do something bold, do something daring, whether she's speaking up to somebody, taking charge of a situation, or secretly and like kind of under the covers planting some sort of evidence that will bear fruit. I want to see Irene do some just nasty stuff, just awesome stuff. That's a great question. What do you say?
You know, Scott's become a real like big player last couple novels, and I definitely want to see that continue. In my mind's sort of like a continuation of what's got to be there. I don't want to see him take a back seat, become ancillary, small little toy in the toy box. I need Scott to be almost 1-to-1 with Mitch going forward. Like he's that important of a character. At least I feel like. I don't know.
It's true.
And I want to see some more of these other like historical mid-trap, universe guys come back into the fold, and like let's see more of them. Like
yeah. I wouldn't mind that. That's a good one. I definitely want more Scott Coleman. I can't disagree with that. But yeah, if Don can go and pull and pluck some character from the depths of getting forgotten in the Mid-Trap saga and give them a reason to be front and center, yeah, that'd be really cool. That'd be a lot of fun. I guess on that note, how badly, because some people are predicting this, how badly do you want to see Don be the one to write the Kill Shot sequel?
I don't know. Let's see what his own first novel is. I think.
Well, I was going to say, would it be his first novel? Because some people are predicting that.
Really, I don't. If they didn't let Kyle do it, I don't think they'll let.
You don't see
Don do it. No,
would it not be easier? Because somebody argued this, and I thought it was really good. Would it not be easier to have him do that? That way, he only has to basically recapture Vince's writing. He doesn't have to try to blend parts of Vince and parts of Kyle and make it modern. He can just say, nope, I'm going back where Vince left off. He basically can do what Kyle did, right? Take where Vince left off, write the story. Wouldn't he be able to do that more freely and easily going back to Killshot? Take where Vince left off and try to do what Kyle did with The Survivor.
That's great. What if Code Red Mitch dies?
Dude, stop it. Stop it.
And going forward,
stop it.
All of Don's books are just the books in between Killshot and Transfer of Power.
Chris, you're canceled. It's over. You're canceled, all right?
Hot take.
I cancel you. I unilaterally cancel you. I'm going to have Emily Bessler cancel you, okay? Everyone's canceling you. You're canceled.
Thanks. No, I think it's just going to be a sequel to Code Red, or not even a sequel. Like I think like we're going to see some sort of like ending, and then Don can just pick up and do whatever he wants. And maybe sometime in the future, or it may never get answered, and it's fine. Like it's I'd rather leave it as it is than have some sort of half-assed attempt or unsatisfactory attempt just to have a book there.
So you'd basically rather end with Return of the Jedi instead of having some prequels and sequels. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I mean, I always like more content when it comes to Star Wars, but
somehow Palpatine returned.
We would have never got The Mandalorian if that wasn't the case, and I love that show. So,
if you can have one character, let's say somebody gives Don Bentley a fifth series to inherit because he's already doing 18 million other things, and they go take one character from Mid-Trap and give him a spin-off series. Who would you want it to be? Obviously, Scott. You've already said that.
Spin-off series? Well, since he's already doing the Jack Ryan Jr. stuff, maybe Tommy getting drafted into the State Department,
Tommy Kennedy,
CIA, and he becomes an analyst / handler or case officer,
diplomat.
I don't know what they call him I don't know what they call him anymore, but yeah,
Rory Nash,
young Rory Nash, both of them.
His roommates with Rory Nash. They're rooming together.
Both of them go into the Foreign Service / CIA.
Dude, it's a good thing we weren't hired to write this series. But no, I like it. Yeah. Well, guys, if you have any other theories, because, we haven't read all the Don Bentley books, we definitely look forward to covering them here on the podcast. And by the way, sign up for No Limits, the Thriller podcast, our third podcast feed. We're going to be covering those books over there. But if you have other ideas, connections of how you think Don's style and what he's going to bring to the series, what you expect, not necessarily predictions, but just general thematic, stylistic, and even character building connections that could be brought into the series, hit us up. We definitely want to hear from you. You're the experts, not us. And we would definitely explore that later on the pod down the road. But for now, we're going to leave you with a short clip from our Without Sanction review. Again, we have a full episode, over an hour, of us discussing, ranking, and rating this book on No Limits, the Thriller podcast. I absolutely recommend you get to the very end of that episode, the last couple of minutes. Chris and I like to, when we review a book, give our winners of the book. And we both chose Don Bentley as our winner because that is a kick-ass debut book. And I read a quote, an extremely powerful, moving quote, written in first person from Matt Drake, the main character's perspective. And it just shows Don has the skill, the talent. He nails this one passage. It's just a powerful, emotional passage towards the end of the book. I had to read it on air. So definitely want you to hear that shout out at the end of the Without Sanction episode over at No Limits, the Thriller podcast. But here's a brief preview for you now. "100% with you. I can't agree more. I don't think I was ever ambivalent. I wasn't worried in any way, but in the back of my mind,
Sure.
I was like, I don't know who this is. I've heard all the news, I've read the bios, I've heard interviews, but I have not read his written work yet. So this was a big opportunity for me to kind of come into it. Actually, I had two mindsets. One was, I want to let this book stand on its own and read it as it is. I want to look for these connections. But another thing is, it's rather simple. And I say that in a good way because I feel like Kyle, he swung for the fences, as we've said many times, and he let his imagination run wild. And man, that was just a whole lot of fun. Like everything we did with Mitch going to these, countries he's never been to before, dealing with these threats he's never dealt with before. And we just had him in new situations. I feel like Don really streamlined this book. It was a very almost straightforward story. It didn't get overly complex. You didn't lose the reader in mindless rabbit holes and side quests. It kept to the story. It had a tight plot, really tight pacing, great action sequence pacing. And so not that I don't like what Kyle did in the series because we're over the moon about it, but I do think there's a chance for simplicity here to tell a tight, concise Mitch-Rapp story in the Mitch-Rapp universe that doesn't necessarily go into this wild imagination. And I really thought Don's book here was very grounded. It's essentially one ranger dealing with his personal demons, but also feeling the pressure to save another fellow ranger because no one will be left behind. And that's a very simple story, yet the way he fleshed it out was just knockout. And so I like the tight, simplistic storytelling, and I say simplistic in a very good way.
Yeah, no, and I think this book was pretty well received. It's got a 4.2 on Goodreads, 4.4 on Amazon. On the cover, we get a quote from Lee Child: "Sensationally good." Like you said, I think it's very tight. It tells an interest. And I guess I shouldn't claim to be an expert. You're more of an expert in this genre than me, but we haven't had many that have DIA as the focus. So that's something new to me. An Army Ranger. Oftentimes we've dealt a lot with Navy SEALs or CIA operatives. You could tell that Don, hailing from the Army, has great respect for these players, these operatives. I think once we got into Syria and we're getting into mission preparation, mission action scenes, it was freaking humming, man.
That's where it took off.
It was so crisp,
Dude.
So clean. I'm reading it and I wanted to text you, but I didn't. I wanted to say it for the pod too. Just like, this is freaking awesome. The whole hey ho jump sequence and going into that description and the pre-flight check. I've never been more intrigued or like, enthused about everything that was going on.
Yeah. The minutia.
That was exactly, I cared about it. I appreciated it. And it was that attention to detail that really, really sung that Don put here.
I'll be honest. I don't think the book really started for me until that Hey Ho Jump and him embedded in Syria. The minute that happened, to me, it became a different book and I became a different reader. I, unfortunately, and
Right.
I'll admit to the people, I started the book in the first third or so. I wouldn't say down on it, but I was okay, I see what he's doing with the PTSD. I kind of like that angle. Not sure I'm down with the writing just yet. I liked what he was doing in the White House. We're going to talk about some of the characters and the chief of staff, Peter Redman. I'm like, yeah, I could see where you're going with this guy's conflicted interest and his need to get his presidential candidate elected. That's going to trump everything. And I was even questioning the whole first person perspective. I think that's an elephant in the room we got to talk about. At first, I wasn't sure how I felt. Jumping back from Matt Drake, we're in his shoes, in his mind, first person storytelling. Then we go to the White House and it's third person, but with a bias. We're clearly in like Peter's shoes. It's not first person, but we're being led to believe that Beverly, the DCI, the CIA director, she's the bad actor. And I don't know if I can truly believe everything being said about her because it's coming from this Peter character.
We hope you enjoyed that preview. As Mike said, go check it out on our No Limits, the Thriller podcast. And as always, we need to thank our patrons, our special operator Sherry F., our special agents Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcast. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Insta at thrillerpodcast. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch.
Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crux.